Sans was getting soft from proximity to someone as aggressively good-hearted as the High Priestess, because he found he didn't want to demolish the entire wall. For one thing, without his magic, it'd be too much effort. More importantly, though, Frisk's rooms were many, many stories above the ground, and falling masonry could kill or injure someone below who hadn't earned it. Most important of all, Frisk would probably end up trying to help dig them out and put herself in danger. He also figured that he had time to do things neatly and cost her less in repairs. Everything had been loosened by that first colossal blow, but he had to give it a few more whacks before he could start pulling it apart, making a pile of glass shards, wood paneling, bricks, and stones in front of her office. Luckily, whoever had constructed the outside wall hadn't done a great job, or else it would have taken him all night. A carefully judged body slam was enough to weaken the remaining support structures. A few kicks and a yank created a space big enough for the giant skeleton to squeeze through, and then he could see the barrier itself. Panting, Sans took a moment to survey his handiwork. It sucked to exert himself like that, but he figured that sometimes in life, you just had to punch things until they broke. Unfortunately, he didn't have that option with the barrier. The old stories came back to him as he stared at the golden latticework hovering outside the ruined wall. How was he going to get through without touching it directly or throwing something big enough to hurt someone below? His eyes fell on the work table and the vials of stuff he'd made this afternoon. 4 hadn't been infused yet. Sans grabbed one, pulled off the cork, and with a speck of magic, willed the liquid to boil, burn, dissolve anything it touched. It promptly began to fizzle and hiss in his hand, and he had to fling it away like an idiot before it started eating through his metacarpals. He did one thing right in throwing it at the barrier, which instantly melted and let the chilly night air wash over him. Outside, moonlight shadowed the bricks of a nearby wall that stretched almost all the way to the ground, ending in the roof of a building only a couple stories high. He could hop out, grab onto the brick edifice, climb down safely, and be gone before Frisk even got back up here, never mind moving the statue and getting the doors open. From there, it'd only be a matter of time before his magic regenerated and he could take a shortcut home. Poor Frisk. She'd tried. Hell, she'd survived his murder attempts and taught him a few things. And he'd never forget her. Maybe he'd get a music box or something in her honor. Anyway, she was better off losing track of him and finding a smaller, tamer monster to work with. What was she even getting from him being here, besides a hell of a lot of trouble? The question was supposed to be rhetorical, but, as if in reply, he thought of Frisk standing at the work table with her arm up those ridiculously oversized trousers, grinning and saying,
"The pleasure of your company."
Looking up at him like he was her friend, not an inferior or a dangerous monster or a giant pain in the ass, pun absolutely intended. Of course, it wasn't as if she had many other friends, but he couldn't tell himself that she was just using a captive freak to keep her company. He already knew her too well for that. This, right here, this was why he needed to leave, now. The skeleton took a few steps back, gauging the distance to... went something in his mental ear. He jerked around to see Frisk, standing half in his shadow, half in the moonlight, with her veil in her hand and absolute murder in her eye.
Sans?
It was a whisper, lost in the wind.
Shit, fuck, shit, fuckity fuck, shit!
Rang in his head as the satchel hit the floor.
Frisk?
He whispered. Frisk beckoned him closer with one finger. Unbelieving, he knelt, and she punched him so hard that he almost felt it.
"Here is what's going to happen,"
she said as he touched his jaw.
"I assume you've blocked the doors, so you will go and unblock them. And I'll tell the guard that you were, we'll say you were fighting off an assassin, and everyone will be impressed when they see how much damage you did trying to kill him before he escaped, won't they?"
Sans nodded helplessly.
How'd you...
"How did I get here?"
She tossed the veil aside, letting it drift to the floor.
"Let me tell you a story, Sans. Once upon a time, yesterday morning, I had a long talk with Dr. Seraph. He said you probably didn't intend to stay for a whole month, and I needed to be on my guard, just in case you decided to pull a stunt like this. I didn't want to believe him, but I followed his advice, and lo and behold, less than a week later, I caught my lying, backstabbing apprentice trying to break his word because he was apparently too bored with me to waste time learning crucial information for the survival of his entire race. The end!
Frisk had to pause for breath. The boss monster took great exception to that last accusation, and he doubted that was actually the end of the story, but he was afraid to interrupt.
Do you see this?
She continued. Sans flinched as the tiny woman ripped off her brooch and brandished it at him.
Dr. Seraph brought it yesterday afternoon. It seems he'd taken some of your magic while you were unconscious. And not only did he refuse to return it to you, he said I couldn't be here every hour of the day, and I needed to have this if you ever tried to break loose. He infused it with enough of your power to teleport myself one time. Do you have any idea how angry I am that he was right, and I was right to listen? And do you know how sick to my stomach I feel right now?
Frisk threw the brooch to the floor, where it shattered. The last bit of magic quietly evaporated, and she pressed the back of her hand to her lips, eyes unfocusing.
And how do you stand?
There it was. He couldn't believe it had taken this long to catch up with her. The first time he'd tried using a shortcut, it left him feeling like his head had been screwed on backwards. The skeleton glanced at the open, crumbling wall, then at Frisk, who was leaning heavily on the work table, eyes closed. Then the priestess squeaked as Sans swept her up into the crook of his arm and headed to the bathroom.
Put me down,
she croaked, thumping his clavicle.
Yes, m'lady,
he said, opening the door, poking the light on, and placing her at the very back of the room.
Go for it.
Once she was settled and could puke in relative peace, Sans went to the double doors leading into the hall, replaced the statue in its niche, and headed back to the workroom. Her office door was blocked by the many chunks of wall piled in front of it, and moving them again would take effort, so the skeleton ignored it for now. He picked up the satchel and set it on the work table, wondering if the wind was too cold for her, and how, exactly, he was going to pay for this in every sense of the word. After one more look outside, Sans made himself tiptoe back to the bathroom and ask,
You done?
There was a pause, the sound of water running, and a much longer pause before she opened the door and stared up at him.
What are you still doing here?
She demanded. Sans blinked at her, mostly for effect.
Is that a trick question? I'm making sure you're okay. That magic can knock you on your ass the first couple of times you try it.
Her face tightened, a hard, bitter expression that probably shouldn't have surprised him.
You don't say.
She turned her head to cough, resting her forehead on the tile wall.
Congratulations to you, Sans. I'm here, but I'm in no condition to do anything. Your plan worked after all.
She pushed herself upright.
Good night.
Shit.
First.
The priestess walked right by to open the double doors, humming like a swarm of bees. He heard her exclaim something about the guard not being there, and mutter that she'd deal with it in the morning. She barred the doors shut, which he hadn't even noticed was an option, and wobbled past him into her dressing room, evading his half-hearted attempt to steady her. Hangers rattled. There was an occasional sniffle. When Frisk came out in a long, crushed velvet robe, she actually looked offended to see him.
Don't you have somewhere to be? I said good night, Sans.
Wasn't she going to at least try to stop him? Sure, she was sick and exhausted, but where was her determination? Was she so upset that she was determined to cut her losses and let him go? That really seemed to be it. Well, Sans should have been elated, but mostly he just felt insulted. Besides, he couldn't leave until they got a few things straight, or else he'd spend the rest of his life trying not to think about it. The boss monster racked his brain for a witty yet conciliatory opener, but what came out was...
You're not boring?
A blast of wind howled through the room, flipping the lighter books open and ruffling the weighed-down stacks of paper. Frisk remained stock still as her short, wavy hair fluttered across her face.
I beg your pardon?
She said, colder than the autumn air.
Okay, yeah, I admit it. I was gonna ditch you.
He said desperately.
But it wasn't 'cause I don't like you or I don't care about helping the other monsters. Okay, you remember all you heard about Papyrus, right?
Her expression softened a little as she nodded.
I had a dream about him last night that I'm pretty sure was real. Me being God and him not knowing I'm okay is killing him, Frisk. I can't.
She stayed silent as Sans pressed the heel of his hand to his forehead. It had been so long since he'd told someone the entire truth that he felt completely exposed. It was scary as hell, but he owed it to her and to Pap.
You gotta understand, my brother's all I got left, and I'm all he's got. You've been nothing but fair to me, and it's not your fault there's no real way to contact him. I can't go a whole month without letting him know I'll be home soon. I can't dream at him with your barrier up.
He sat down with his legs crossed, staring at the floor.
I spend too much damn time away as it is. He never knows for sure if I'm coming back.
Frisk swallowed.
Why didn't you tell me sooner how important this was to you? And what do you mean, dream at him?
I didn't bother because you might have thought I was lying to make you feel sorry for me. I know I wouldn't trust me.
The skeleton jerked his head at the ruined wall.
What I mean is, I can talk to Pap while we're both dreaming, but you wouldn't be there to hear what we were saying. I could tell him all sorts of crap, like how strong the High Priestess is and how much safer it'd be for us monsters if she was dead.
The priestess was silent again. Sans risked a glance in time to see her reach up to sweep her hair behind her ear, only to yelp in pain. Sure enough, as she raised her hand to inspect it, the outside knuckle was red and swollen.
How did I not notice this?
Frisk tried to move it and had to stifle another exclamation.
Oh, wonderful. If it hurts this much, I must have broken it.
She made an incoherent noise and started toward the rack of finished potions on the work table. Sans dimly recalled that humans didn't feel as much pain when they were scared or excited, and that it could catch up to them pretty fast. It also occurred to him that it was a bad idea for a small human to hit a thick-headed skeleton with her bare hand.
What are you doing? You can heal that up in a jiffy.
I can't heal myself. I'm not very adept at healing to begin with, and I can't make it work on me at all.
That couldn't be right.
You mean to tell me you're good enough to hold me off and keep me penned in for days with no magic, but...
Leave me alone.
Her voice was so quiet and furious that he stopped dead. But as she picked a vial and started to pull the cork out with her teeth, Sans got up and held his own hand out.
Let me see.
With as much dignity as she could muster, Frisk closed her mouth and handed him the vial. He put it back impatiently and beckoned again.
Not that, dummy, your hand!
The priestess gave him a long, eloquent look. When he didn't move, she placed her broken hand in his huge one, wincing as his thumb closed lightly over her wrist. It was hard to remember how to turn his magic green, but she'd been right about intentions. It helped to think about how badly he wanted it to work. Not only to help her, but to prove that he was capable of fixing things as well as destroying them. Sure enough, within seconds, his palm began to glow as if he held a handful of emeralds. When Sans could bring himself to let her go, she flexed it easily.
You've gotten some magic back already,
she observed. Frisk smiled at him for a moment, and he couldn't not smile back.
You know,
she said, anger rapidly resurfacing.
You're not only a lying reprobate, you are a huge idiot.
She rapped her knuckles on his palm.
I've always had a barrier guarding the bedroom from any external magic. If that was the only thing keeping you from reaching Papyrus, you should have asked me to remove it.
Sans sat down again.
But
As for the possibility of giving him illicit information, I will ask you this only once.
Frisk moved closer, looking him square in the sockets.
Do you intend to tell the other monsters at any point that your race would be better off with me dead?
He didn't even have to think about it before he answered.
not anymore. You're pretty damn useful as you are, speaking up on our behalf to the other humans. I don't see anyone pressuring you to screwing us over.
A brief smile.
I'm glad to hear it. For my part, I don't mind letting you talk to your brother, as long as you take me with you. I'd love to say hello. I've heard so much about him that it'll be like meeting an old friend. If you start tattling on me in some fashion, I can always pull the barrier back up.
You want me to bring you in my dream?
Blink, blink.
But how? What are you gonna...
One thing at a time, Sans. First, we're going to bed.
We're what now?
If you're not leaving yet, then we're going to bed. Now. This mess can wait till morning.
With a nod at her blocked office door, Frisk motioned for him to follow her into the bedroom.
Come along. There's nowhere else for me to sleep, and I'm freezing.
And so it was that Sans found himself lying rigid on the huge feather mattress, the priestess curled up like a cat in the armchair. He had no idea why he was so nervous. He couldn't even muster a semi-joke about her joining him in bed.
I've heard of this spell before,
said Frisk, who seemed unperturbed by their proximity.
It's not very complicated. You've just healed me, and I've recently used some of your magic, so we have enough of a connection that I should be able to find you once we're asleep. The key word being sleep, Sans. You have to relax. I'm not going to eat you, no matter how short-sighted and dishonorable you've been.
You're not gonna let that go, are you?
He mumbled.
You have no idea. We haven't even talked about repairing the wall yet. For now, though, don't worry about it. We need to find Papyrus and set you both at ease.
Now Sans felt nervous and extremely weird again. He turned onto his side so she couldn't see him changing color.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Of course,
she said, as though it was the most natural thing in the world to do a favor for someone who had completely betrayed her trust and turned off the witchlight. He felt her raise another barrier at the bedroom door, one solid enough to stop an army, and a thinner barrier disappeared from behind the headboard.
There,
she said in the darkness.
We'll see how well this works. Go to sleep, Sans.
That seemed unlikely, but he'd forgotten who he was dealing with. When about 10 minutes had passed and the orange light of his eyes was still going strong, something wonderful started creeping up on him. A soothing vibration that spread through every bone in his body before he even knew what he was hearing. It was Frisk humming, of course, and of course it worked. Sans was more than content to let the sound and her presence lull him to sleep. He jerked upright as something hit his skull, reflexively swatting the air and yelling,
Piss off!
The lights were back on. In fact, it was full daylight, or what passed for it. Sans rubbed his eye sockets, turning this way and that. He was still in bed, but the bed stood alone in the middle of an open, snowy field. Kid monsters were racing back and forth under gaily decorated trees, throwing snowballs at each other and catching him in the crossfire. The skeleton brushed himself off, reasoning that the underground could be a weird place, but it wasn't quite random snowbed weird. This must be a dream, then. Damn it. Oh well. At least it was a nice one, and it felt pretty real. His good dreams tended to be fuzzy, while every single one of his nightmares was incredibly vivid. Footsteps crunched on the snow behind him.
Well, hello there. That was simple,
said Frisk, looking around them as he got up. She was in her plush robe and bare feet, but seemed at ease.
So, this is Snowden. Which house is yours?
Brother?
Sans froze as a familiar shape emerged from a nearby fog of ice crystals.
Papyrus?
I knew it!
Papyrus had run to give his brother a bear hug and fell straight through him, as if Sans was also made of fog.
What is this, Sans? Have you become too lazy to stay solid?
He accused him from the ground.
It's a dream, bro. This happens every damn time. Just keep it together and listen, okay? I'm here to let you know...
Wait, a human? Is that Chris?
Papyrus was staring up at Frisk, his face somehow creased in puzzlement.
Is that really you? I thought you'd be... Chrisser. Yeah.
Not every human is Chris, Pap. Don't be racist.
Hello,
Frisk said, offering a bright smile and a hand up.
my name is Frisk. It's wonderful to meet you, Papyrus.
Yes, it is. Yeah. You are clearly very wise and attractive, human.
Papyrus brushed the snow from his fake armor, throwing his red scarf back over his shoulder in so dramatic a fashion that he didn't notice Frisk grinning, though Sans sure did.
What are you doing in my great and attractive dream?
He added. Still smiling, Frisk watched the pack of young monsters run by. The kids didn't seem to notice them, though the bed was still there and her purple robe stood out like a dark beacon against the snow.
Your brother wanted to see you, and I decided to come along. Sans was captured by humans about a week ago when he was out looking for food, but please don't worry about...
Captured?
Papyrus clapped both hands to his skull.
This is terrible! Please, decapture him immediately, human, or else I...
Pap, take it easy. She's okay. In fact, she's the reason I ain't dead or enslaved right now.
Sans plucked at his shirt.
See, she even got me some new duds. You could finally stop bitching about what I'm wearing.
Papyrus stopped flailing long enough to examine Sans' shirt.
Yeah? I see no holes or questionable stains. What sorcery is this?
Sans smirked, letting his brother poke at him in vain.
I told you, bro. I just got it. You don't have to rip me apart like this.
Frisk rocked back and forth on her heels.
So,
She said, over Papyrus's exasperated groaning.
I gather you knew a boy named Chris from the last human delegation. Is that right?
Yes, it is right. Chris was our dear friend.
Papyrus said, as Sans grimaced and turned away.
We went for walks, we had sleepovers, we made hand puppets that also had sleepovers. It was like having a cute little pet that cleaned up after itself. We've all missed him very much. Yeah.
Yeah, he left with the other humans. Can we please move on now?
Yes, of course. I'm going to borrow your brother for a few more weeks.
Frisk told Papyrus. The latter was glaring at his brother's new shirt again, as if daring it to make a false move.
I have a plan to start making peace between monsters and humans. But I need a monster's help to do it. Can you get along without Sans until I send him back to the underground?
Papyrus straightened, one hand on his chin.
You won't hurt him?
Absolutely not, Papyrus. He'll be back safe and sound.
Papyrus nodded, evidently impressed by her sincerity.
I am impressed by your sincerity, human. If this dream is not my magnificent imagination playing tricks on me again, then I, the great Papyrus, shall spare my good-for-nothing brother for a little while longer.
Without warning, the skeleton grabbed at Sans' wrist bones.
Human, I would like to talk to my brother in secret for a moment, if you will please excuse us. It will be secret.
Of course. I'll be right here. Just make sure it's not too secret, please.
Sans covered his face with his hand as Papyrus marched toward the fog bank, still holding his brother's imaginary wrist.
You can't touch me, remember?
Sans called after him.
I knew that. Congratulations, brother. You've passed his test. Nyeh.
Papyrus waited for Sans to join him, and they walked towards the river.
Are you sure that's not Chris?
Sans laughed, jerking his thumb in Frisk's direction.
Does that human look like a 16-ish-year-old boy?
No, it looks like a human, but it seems delightful. The Great Papyrus thinks you should bring it back here with you. It's been too long since we had a human to pillow fight with.
That's probably not a great idea.
Why not?
I could spend literally the rest of the night telling you all the reasons why not, but the biggest one is that she's the High Priestess, Pap. The other humans would definitely notice if she was gone.
High Priestess?
Papyrus cocked his head in perplexity.
Why would a delightful human be a High Priestess? Don't they create barriers?
It's complicated, bro. Look, I've gotta go soon. Is there anything else you want to say?
His younger brother paused and sighed, shoulders slumping.
Sans, were you really just looking for food? When you got caught, I mean.
The bigger skeleton tried to kick a chunk of ice into the water, his foot passing right through it.
I wasn't slaughtering humans, if that's what you're asking. I was mostly trying to track down monsters who have been sold off recently. But I did want to see how the humans' harvests are turning out. And it looks like it was pretty good this year.
Papyrus nodded, still troubled.
All right, brother, I understand. Please, just take care of yourself. Yeah,
you too, Pap.
Sans felt a familiar stab of trepidation and backed away.
Shit, I've got a nightmare coming. I'll see you soon, okay? Don't tell anyone about Frisk.
He had to turn and run before Papyrus could answer. Frisk was sitting on the bed in the snowfield, ducking snowballs. She turned and started to say,
I hope you weren't telling on me.
No more dream. End it now.
He panted. The priestess didn't waste time asking stupid questions. As the nightmare nipped at Sans' heel, Frisk made a quick swiping gesture. And just like that, he was back in bed, in the bedroom, staring at the sun-washed ceiling. The skeleton sighed in relief. He rested his forearm across his eyes. Between the radius and ulna, he could see the flickering shadows of birds flying past the open windows.
Thanks, kiddo, and thanks for letting me talk to him. I really appreciate it.
Sans scratched the top of his skull, rolling over to face Frisk.
So, how'd you like Papyrus? He's a cool guy, huh?
Frisk didn't answer because she wasn't there. A strange human child sat in the armchair, perched on the edge of the seat, holding a kitchen knife. It stared at him with red, shining eyes, teeth bared in a horrible grin.